entered the United States illegally is subject to deportation. That is what it means to have laws and to have a country.
So that was Donald Trump in Arizona last night addressing what had been one of the major issues hanging over that speech, what to do with the millions of undocumented immigrants already in the country. Now, the speech provided some clarity, but it still left a lot open to interpretation. So let's dive in and take a closer look at what exactly Donald Trump says he's calling for when it comes to the issue of deportation. So you have right now an estimated 11 million people living in this country who entered illegally. That's the estimate, 11 million. So what is Trump saying to do with that 11 million? Well, he talked in that speech about prioritizing, for instance, deportations for those who've committed criminal acts. There are various estimates about how many of those 11 million fall into this category. On the high end, it's about 2 million. On the low end, it'd be about 600,000. So that would be up to 2 million of the 11 million that Trump is talking about prioritizing for immediate deportation. Another group he talked about there, he said people who have overstayed their visas. It's expired. They're still in the country. He says they shouldn't be here. He says they should be prioritized for deportation as well. The estimate there is we're talking about 4.5 million people who would fall into that category. So these are the two big, broad groups that Trump is talking about, making it a priority to deport. If you say 2 million on the high end when it comes to criminals, if you say 4.5 million when it comes to those who've overstayed their visas, as you can see, that's going to get you to about 6.5 million that he would deport immediately. That's about 60% of the total. But of course, that's going to leave more than 4 million people, 4.5, 5 million people, maybe more, who are not prioritized by Donald Trump when it comes to deportation. So what would that leave them? Where would that leave them? What would their status be? 4, 5 million people under a Donald Trump presidency. Well, that's the part that's a little bit open to interpretation. That's the part that's still a little bit unclear after this speech last night. It is something that Donald Trump talked about in more broad terms. Let's take a listen.
Importantly, in several years, when we have accomplished all of our enforcement and deportation goals and truly ended illegal immigration for good, then and only then will we be in a position to consider the appropriate disposition of those individuals who remain. That discussion can take place only in an atmosphere in which illegal immigration is a memory of the past.
All right, but this is my question. What does that mean? Because he's acting like illegal immigrants aren't going to commit any crimes going forward once he, I guess, targets his 2 million people, okay? Illegal immigrants are going to continue to commit crimes, okay? So that's going to be a never-ending process. Then you have the 4.5 million people that have overstayed their visas. Well, let's say you could actually target them. Are you saying that there aren't going to be any more people that are going to overstay their visas? So that also is going to be a continuing process. So as long as those two things continue, the other quote-unquote, at this point, I guess, 4.5 million people are basically going to be in limbo. Okay, because you're not going to, he's claiming that you're not going to act on them until you get all the criminals and all the visa overstays out of here. And you're never going to get all of them. So at what point do you consider getting enough criminals out and enough overstayed visas out that you can consider that problem minimal enough that you can concentrate on the people that are left? Now, if you are going to act on the laws that are already on the books, then everybody else is going to have to be deported because the laws state that if you're here illegally, you gotta go. Plain and simple, unless you apply for some type of asylum for various reasons, religious prosecution, human rights, stuff like that. You can always apply for asylum. So are they going to process the other 4 million people based on some type of asylum request? Yeah, I don't know. He didn't say that. Anyway, here comes this Joe Jackoff, Boris Epshteyn, and he's going to spin this.
For more on what Trump is calling for, I want to bring in now Boris Epshteyn. He's a senior advisor to the Trump campaign. So, Boris, we ran through the numbers there. You're looking at right now probably about 6 million under what Donald Trump put out last night. 6 million, and he's saying, hey, I become president right away. I'm moving to deport. Is this fair to call this a mass deportation plan?
Listen, it's not about the terms, right, Steve? It's about what's going to happen. Donald Trump's
Yeah, it's fair to call it a mass deportation program, but you guys don't like how that sounds, so you want to spin away from it.
very direct. You just laid it out there yourself. That the number one priority is to deport all illegal immigrants or criminals. That's priority number one. After that, you go to ending sanctuary cities, ending catch and release, making sure E-verifies them. Most of the stuff we were talking about with you last night. And then the key contrast, really, for the American people to see is Donald Trump, who's going to secure the border, make sure Americans keep their jobs, stay safe, and Hillary Clinton with her 100-day amnesty plan, the 550% increase in Syrian refugees. She wants to have an open border policy. She wants to have open borders.
Well,
really swing.
Okay, but let's if we're talking contrast, let's keep it focused on the people we were just talking about there, because I think there's an interesting contrast here, and I'm curious what the Trump side of this is. The Clinton side is that 5 million we're talking about who do not fall into the category. No overstaying the visa there, no criminal record. So 5 million people. The Clinton side of this is, hey, there should be a process in place for these people. Many of them have been living in this country for a long time, following the laws,
right.
They work, all of these things, that there should then be a process in place to give them citizenship. Ultimately, they have to jump through a bunch of... Okay, so that, well, okay, so you guys call that amnesty.
Right.
That's the Clinton side, that's what you call it. I'm not clear, though, what Donald Trump wants to do with those 5 million people. Under a Trump presidency, what happens to them?
Well, again, the key is to go run through those 10 points that you talked about yesterday. That's the...
See, and this is the bullshit they come up with. He can't answer the question because he doesn't know what Trump wants to do with those 4 million people. It's either you're going to create a process for citizenship or legalization, or you're not. There's no in between. And this guy won't step up to the plate and say what Trump's plan is for those 4 million people. So they're basically still going to be living in limbo.
That's the priority. And as you know very well, when you govern, you have to make priorities.
Right, so they don't fall into his list of priorities. So what does that mean?
And then, as far as the illegal immigrants who are not criminals, who don't fall into these other categories, you work within the laws on the books now, laws you pass in accordance in working with Congress, the Constitution, and very importantly, something he said this morning again, humanely. So that's what Donald Trump is saying. We'll be laying out, he'll be laying out more specifics as time goes on. But again, the key...
Yeah, but see, last night was when he was supposed to let us know what he was going to do with the 11 million people that he's constantly talking about. So you're talking about humanely. The laws on the books require that all those people be deported. So what are you going to do? What's your plan? Are you going to deport those other 4 million people? Yes or no? And Steve doesn't press him on this. I would have been up his ass on this.
Here are the issues that he concentrated on yesterday that me and you've been talking about for a while now, that making sure that all illegal immigrants who are criminals are deported, making sure that cities like San Francisco are no longer sanctuary cities, so murders like the horrible murder of Kate Stallion doesn't happen.
We get that, but again, what is the goal? We're talking 5 million people. Is the goal eventually to get them out of the country? The goal for Hillary Clinton is to eventually give them legal status in this country. What's the goal of Donald Trump for 5 million people?
Let's be honest with you. The goal for Hillary Clinton is to maximize her voting base. So if she could, she'd give citizenship to all 11 million.
See, he's spinning again. And they keep asking him, what's the goal, what's the plan? And they can never come up with what their actual goal is or what the plan is. So he's spinning again.
That's what she wants.
Okay, but that's how but I'm saying, what is the goal for Donald Trump?
The goal for Donald Trump is making sure that America is a sovereign nation, that we have a real border, both north, south, and in air, everywhere. We have a true border in this country. That's what he's going to do with the wall. Make sure Mexico does pay for the wall. And then from then on, the goal is to go through the points we've been discussing, and then once you're left with a much smaller number of illegal immigrants who are here who have not committed a crime, then again you have to deal with them according to the laws that are on the books now and with the laws you could pass.
In other words, does that mean that eventually there could be some kind of process to give them legal status?
There's not going to be amnesty. There's no process to...
So when he says, well, wait a few years down the road and then talk about it, it's not talk about giving them any kind of legal status?
There's no path to citizenship.
Legal status.
There's no path to.
See, that's why Steve pushed them for legal status, which wouldn't be citizenship, but it would allow them to legally stay here, and he won't even come clean on that. So, as I stated, there's only two ways to go. Either they could stay here legally, legal status, or citizenship, or they gotta go. But it's gotta be one out of the two.
Citizenship for those illegal immigrants who are here now. We will work through the details when the time comes, but again, the key is to deal with the priorities that are on the table now, which is those illegal immigrants who, a lot of them at large, who committed crimes. You know, just 300,000 just in the last few years have been readmitted to the United States who have committed crimes. And again, so important for the voters to recognize that they have such a binary choice, right, when it comes to November 8th and early voting between Hillary Clinton, whose immigration policy, first of all, is not very well detailed, and second of all, involves completely open borders, unconstitutional amnesty executive orders, and Donald Trump, who again will make sure Americans are protected and employed.
See, and that's bullshit because her plan is detailed. Basically, she's talking about the same thing that Trump's talking about. Deport all the criminals, go after all the visa overstays, and then everybody else gets a shot at citizenship through a process, that they'll outline, but at least there's light for them at the end of the tunnel. This guy, there's no light, there's no tunnel, there's no nothing. Those 4 to 4.5 million people are going to be sitting in limbo forever because there are always going to be illegal aliens that are criminals that they're going to be targeting, quote unquote, to deport. And there's always going to be people that are going to be overstaying their visas, so you're going to have to look at them. So those two are going to be constant processes that are never going to come to an end. So those 4 million people or whatever, they're going to be sitting there forever without any type of legal status.